Hello and welcome back once again to CBR MTG. My name is Angus Mackay and I'm joined here by James Caesar.
Hello, everybody.
We are in round 4 of our GP Melbourne National Side event for Highlander. Very exciting event for the Highlander community, turning out a huge 98 players in what Channel Fireball thought might just be a little event, but turned out to be quite large. We have on one side Matt Crutchfield playing Channel Mirror, a very established combo deck, and James O'Rourke playing his own brew of Esper Clamp. James, why don't you run us through Esper Clamp, what it does, how it ticks?
Yeah, it seems to be like a three-color mid-range deck, which James has built several iterations of before. I know he's played Jeskai versions with lots of different planeswalkers like Gideons and Elspeths, so we might see something similar to that. But it basically looks just like three-color value, playing counter spells. I know that he's playing Skullclamp. For those of you following along at home, Skullclamp has recently had a point taken off it. We see here in James's hand, he's got Brimars, King of Oreskos, which is a 3/4 for 3, 1 and 2 white. Which whenever it attacks or blocks, it makes a 1/1 attacking or blocking with it. So that's perfect card. You know, it's good stats, attacks well, and makes fodder for your Skullclamp. So it looks like James is just trying to get in a lot of value here, play some cantrips, play some counterspells.
Yeah, it looks really good, and just trying to find out where you can leak out that little bit of card advantage with now the Skullclamp's one less point, so getting that Brimaz action seems to be pretty good. So we might see that come down as early as turn 3. Nothing too unfair happening here. But on the opposing side, with Matt Crutchfield playing Channel Mirror, this deck is and we'll link a couple of pieces of information in the show notes, because we've had a couple of members of the Highlander community do deck techs on this and sort of explain how it works. But basically, it's using the interaction between Channel, which is a 2-mana. It's 2-mana sorcery that says you can pay X life and add X mana to your mana pool until end of turn. So you have a lot of mana, and basically you try and play Lich's Mirror, which says if you would die, instead basically restart the game on your side, shuffle your permanents back in, draw 7 cards. But you can use the channel effect is still on the stack, so you'll be not still on the stack, still in effect, so you'll be able to pay mana to cycle through your deck, play a lot of spells, and then eventually win the game with either Tendrils or a Big Mama Emrakul.
So it looks like Matt started off with what could be confused with an Elves start here, leading Bayou into Elf, and then 2 other Elves the next turn. I think what gives it away here was he played a Gemstone Mine, which wouldn't typically be in your average Elves deck. And we see a Collective Brutality here from James, ditching a Ponder to escalate, so killing off an Elf, getting a look at Matt's hand, which definitely gives away the game. James taking Mastermind's Acquisition. For those of you who don't know what Mastermind's Acquisition does, it's a 4-mana sorcery. You can go and get a card from your sideboard or tutor from your deck. So it's very, very good for Channel Mirror here. It can go get a kill condition from the sideboard, or it can search out your Lich's Mirror or your Channel or your Emrakul.
Gives you just a whole variety of options. This
Exactly.
Channel Mirror deck is playing, because you actually have access to more mana than most other decks, you can play these 4-mana tutors as opposed to sort of playing Demonic Tutor, or I think this deck actually plays Demonic Tutor as well, but you do have the opportunity of playing these much more expensive tutor effects, just to make sure that your game plan goes along smoothly.
Exactly, yeah. So we see James kind of on a slower start here. Start off with a tap land, pass. Did the turn 2 Collective Brutality after Matt's seemingly explosive start of several mana dorks.
Leading into that memory jar as well.
James has chosen an interesting line here, turn 3, to play his Thalia 2, Electric Boogaloo, and not keeping up. He's got a counterspell in hand. He also has a Thoughtseize. Going for I think a more aggressive line here. He got to see Matt's hand with the Collective Brutality, but it looks like Matt's drawn an increasing ambition.
Yeah, that should help him out quite a lot, being able to tutor up any sort of piece that he needs, but he's still a little bit stifled on mana. I think James was possibly just thinking, next turn I can hold up Counterspell and Thoughtseize, or can play hold up Counterspell and play Thoughtseize and still have this pretty big clock. But the Thalia is actually a pretty decent taxing effect. This is the 3/2 from Shadows over Innistrad, if I'm not mistaken, or Eldritch Moon perhaps, but she makes your non-basic lands come into play tapped and your opposing creatures come into play tapped as well. So this will stop Matt's mana dorks, and it will also stop his non-basic lands, as we see with the Tropic Island coming into the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, we see Matt has cracked his memory jar here. So each player has set their hand aside face down and drawn a fresh 7. This is really, really good for Matt's deck. He wants to play out a bunch of these. He's put out a Scroll Rack and another card that I'm not quite familiar with there. So he gets to dump some cards from his hand, and then basically it's to exile the top 7 cards of his opponent's library. And put them straight into the graveyard.
Yeah, he's definitely just using that sort of as a draw 7, being able to sort of just get a little bit of extra value, and he does have that Lich's Mirror in hand to go along with his thing. So he's got a lot of the Scroll Rack helping him sort of pick through his deck, but all he needs is that one last piece, and that's the he's lost the Lich's Mirror, unfortunately.
Matt lost the mirror there, unfortunately. Look, he's still got quite a few ways to go off in his deck. It's essentially can be a Storm deck, especially when your opponent's life total does get a little bit lower. Casting a couple of cantrips into maybe a draw 7, and then into a Tendrils of Agony can finish your opponent off. Also, worst case, he's got a couple of mana dorks there. He can always get on the beatdown plan. Not ideal, but you got to do what you got to do. Yeah,
and when Matt's tapping out for 5 mana spells with James falling straight into James's counterspell, it might just be locked up from here.
Yeah, by the looks of
Matt had to pay, sack his Gemstone Mine and also take a little bit of damage from that Elves of Deep Shadow.
Yep.
But it's just not going probably as well as he had hoped. Yeah. He's used up too much resources already, and James is just getting started.
Exactly. He's you see it in his hand. He's got a couple of Planeswalkers ready to come down, keeping up counterspells, cantrips. Rumbling with that Thalia, so he's really winding into his late game strategy here of setting into a control deck with a clock. Yeah, absolutely.
You see the power of Esper. You don't often see Esper in all formats, I guess. I mean, Esper Stoneblade's somewhat playable in Legacy, but in Modern, I mean, it's been tried by people who are devotees of the Esper Shard. But in Highlander and most other formats, you just don't really see Esper very much, which is surprising because it's such a strong set of colours.
Yeah, it's got some really, really powerful sideboard options, both in white and blue. It's got that hand disruption with your Black Thoughtseize cards. You control with all of your counterspells. As we see here, a Snapcaster Mage coming back.
Yeah.
Just ripping apart poor Matt's hand. So
it's going to be very hard for Matt to come back in this match, I think.
Exactly.
Scroll Rack not doing very much when you only have one card in hand, and that card appears to be Tendrils of Agony, so he can Tendrils for 2.
Yeah.
Probably not where he wants to be, but it is an option that is open to him.
Yeah. James, again, kind of getting on the aggressive plane here, attacking for 5 in with Thalia. Snapcaster Mage also rumbling in.
Even trading with a mana dork would be something that he'd be totally fine with at this point.
Yeah. Just anything that kind of cuts Matt's outs out, like cutting him off mana. Those mana dorks are actually essential to Matt's plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like I think it's Guest's Verdict. No, that's not correct. It's definitely a card that makes you discard cards. Very powerful in the Highlander format. Gerard's Verdict. My apologies, but each player, target player discards 2 cards, and you gain 3 life for each land card discarded this way. So the sort of second copy of Hymn to Torok that you can have in a singleton format. But when there's one card in hand, there's not a whole lot that you can do about it.
Yeah.
Seems like Matt's picked up a pretty excellent top deck from here with the
Wheel of
Wheel of
Fortune.
Fortune just sort of refilling his hand. So I
Another-
guess it's not over yet.
Yeah, another card that's recently had a point dropped off it, so really helping out these combo decks we've seen all weekend. Unfortunately, Matt here not finding the cards he needed off the top and decided to pack it up.
Just couldn't piece it together with that 7 fresh cards. I mean, he still had a little bit of life. He may have been able to take one more hit, but realistically, that Thalia was probably doing a lot more work than Matt was giving her credit for.
Yeah, exactly. You know, she slices, dices, does it all. You know, she gets in for 3. She also has First Strike, which is, you know, very relevant text in creature matchups, which I think James's Esper deck is geared to beat.
Yeah.
But fortunately, as I said, a lot of sideboard options. So see a Spell Pierce coming in, a Duress. So he wants some more early game interaction just to stop Matt going off as early as possible.
Yeah.
What's Matt bringing in from sideboard for Channel Mirror?
Matt's got a couple of little bits and bobs. He's trying to bring in the hand disruption with the collective brutality, and looks like he's bringing a Xantid Swarm as well. So these sort of he's kind of getting hit from all different angles, which I don't think he's very happy about because he's got to deal with important creatures in a very fast clock, but he also has to deal with counterspells, which is probably not something that he really wants to be dealing with. So this Xantid Swarm might not even be good enough. I mean, he probably has to bring it in because of the situation that he's in, but besides that, probably not in the best place that you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And we can see James taking out cards. He's taken out an Umazawa's Jite there, just because it...
not very good in the non-creature matchup.
Exactly. He's taken out a couple of his Planeswalkers, Elspeth 4 and Liliana the Last Hope. Again, really geared for those creature matchups. But basically a really good indication of Highlander. So we can see James's sideboard out there. He's taken out an Edict effect and also Council's Judgment. 3
Being very studious to point it towards the camera for us.
Yeah.
We see on Matt's side as well, sorry, he brought in Carpet of Flowers, which I think is probably very important, but he might accidentally be pushing himself into a... perhaps through inexperience or just because of the situation that he's in, but he's sided in quite a few amount of cards, at least 9 by the looks of it. And when you're playing a combo deck, you probably don't want to be siding in that many things.
Exactly.
But,
especially because he's playing a couple of cards, I would imagine, as before mentioned, Mastermind's Acquisition, which basically turns your sideboard into a wish board. You know, you can get anything that you need in the relevant circumstance. And I'm sure he might have another couple of wish cards in the main board there to help him out. Yeah,
absolutely. But Carpet of Flowers I can definitely get behind. He's also bringing in a Tinderwall. I think trying to bring in the one-shot elves over the elves that are supposed to stick around. I know that Channel Mirror expert Jacob Dunn put in his deck tech that we also have on CBR MTG. We'll link it in the show notes, but he mentioned that taking out your mana dorks is one of the sort of the first ways that you go because they just have a big old target on their head and you want to try and minimize the amount of value that your opponent's getting out of the removal that they've decided to keep in, if they do keep in enough removal.
Yeah, if your opponent's sitting there with a bunch of removal spells in hand and nothing to really point them at, you know, that's kind of good for your game plan. You want your opponent to have as many dead cards as possible so you can go off and they can't really do anything.
Seems that James hasn't quite fallen into that trap of siding out his removal against the combo deck because we didn't see too much removal coming out. I mean, Jit and Elspeth seem like pretty easy side outs, but there wasn't a whole lot of fatal pushes coming out. I think just like getting that just that little bit of value off killing the elf was probably good enough for James to keep those cards in.
I'm interested why might be able to ask him sometime when I see him around, but he took out a Diabolic Edict there, I believe, which is one of the ways I believe that Esper can deal with
Emrakul.
Emrakul, because Channel Mirror, the easy mode of winning is casting Channel on turn 2, even turn 1, and slamming an Emrakul by paying 15 life. And Emrakul, for people who have never actually cast her, normally cheat her in by using Sneak Attack or Show and Tell. She has this really cool ability that says when you cast her, you can take an extra turn, which doesn't really mean your opponent gets to have a lot of interaction with her. But Edict can be one of those ways that you can deal with her before she gets to come in with that big Annihilator 6.
I think I think James. It's quite possible that James was just considering the fact that if Matt cheats it out on turn 2 or turn 1, then he's not going to be able to stop that anyway. He's just going to try and have the force of will or whatever to stop that. So Diabolic Edict might not help in that very, very early game, but in the late game, even taking that extra turn might just be good enough for Matt to win anyway. So killing the Emrakul might just not be worth it, but it's definitely an interesting one. Probably just too expensive at 2 mana.
So here we see the turn 1 Xanted Swarm from Matt, followed up by a turn 1 Thoughtseize from James. So we can see in Matt's hand we've got a land, a Spirit Guide, an Emrakul, and a couple of other cards. We've got Wheel of Fortune
again,
tucked away over there on the left.
And these, Matt's probably pretty happy to be able to get the Xanted Swarm down on turn 1. I think we still have one more land in our hand, as well as the Elvish Spirit Guide, but that Gemstone Mine is running out of counters, and I'm not 100% sure the Xanted Swarm will stick around, but I mean it might. It is turn 1, and James has elected not to kill it immediately, so
exactly, yeah.
Maybe he thought that just casting out Thoughtseize would be just as good as getting rid of the Xanted Swarm, because he might not just be able to go off on turn 2.
Yep. See James taking the Wheel of Fortune there, a solid choice.
Yeah, 100%.
Means Matt can't cast that turn 2. Give a completely random hands to both players.
Yeah. I mean, Matt doesn't have any other fast mana in his hand besides the Elvish Spirit Guide, so he might draw into some more fast mana and probably go off on turn 2 after the Xanted Swarm trigger resolves, so... But couldn't be so lucky, unfortunately. So we're just gonna crack this, and then play some kind of 2-drop or 3-drop. But it looks like he's casting a old artifact that perhaps one of the people will be able to tell us what it is. But there's a lot of weird artifacts in this deck. So
it's like a credit voucher, I think. It says 2 mana, tap, sacrifice it. Shuffle any number of cards from your hand into your library, then draw that many cards.
Sure.
So, quite good in this position where he's drawn one end of his deck and he wants to cash those cards in for something that might win in the game. A couple of new cards off the top.
Yeah, being able to have access to so many different cards across basically the whole vintage list of cards. You get to play weird cards like. Librarian of Lang and a credit voucher, stuff that you've never heard of before playing Highlander, and in this case, still having trouble hearing about it. All right, seeing the credit voucher come down now by the looks of it. Oh no, maybe a 3-drop.
It looks like there's a card there, potentially transmuting for something else. Doesn't look like Tlaria West. He's fabricating. There we go. Sure. Searching his library for an artifact card, putting it into his hand. Shuffling back up there. Yeah. So he's getting his Lotus, which, fantastic card. I'm sure many of our viewers are familiar with Black Lotus, what it does, and why it's worth 4 points in 7-point Highlander.
Absolutely. And I was thinking possibly he may have just been trying to set up maybe getting the Lich's Mirror or another spell that he wouldn't be able to cast, but it seems very wise of him to get the Black Lotus because he can just cast it immediately, not having to worry about any sort of hand disruption from James.
After getting in with that Xanted Swarm.
That's true, and here comes the credit voucher. So, I mean, poor Matt. He's played a lot of cards. Hopefully this credit voucher is good to him, but it's not as good when you don't have very many cards in hand. And
yeah. I mean, we see James here just the land and pass. He seems pretty happy with where he is. This Xanted Swarm obviously getting in and getting across each turn, putting a little bit of pressure on James because it means that any card that Matt rips off the top could be the next combo card.
Yeah, 100%.
That Matt needs to go off. It could be the channel, and it's very easy for Matt to just each turn go, get in with my Xanted Swarm, don't worry about it, and James goes, okay, sure, no worries, take 0.
Yeah,
and fall into that trap of then going, oh no, I actually did want to counterspell that.
It looks like he's casting this Vandalion Click in response to the trigger.
Yeah.
So he will actually, this is pretty good for him. I mean, he's almost certainly going to target his opponent, seeing Metamorphose and Emrakul in hand, and deciding whether or not he wants to let him keep it or let him shuffle it back in, or put it back on the bottom of the library. But I think he's pretty happy with it. But being able to block this Xantid Swarm is pretty good time.
Yep, for sure. So what are the points in our channel channel mirror deck here, Angus? We've got obviously we've got Lotus on screen, and what else?
Channel is a point, and there's one other point as well, but the notorious for having less than the required amount of points just in cases, because there is Spellseeker in that deck and there is Wheel of Fortune in that deck, so if things go a little awry, there's still opportunity to play a deck just as good but actually play 7 points. So I know that the Channel Mirror players are pretty happy with pretty happy with having that happen. But channel is 2 and Memory Jar is 1. So in this current build, we do see the full 7 points. But how exactly you decide to play it is definitely up to you.
Yeah, here we see again James is now really settling into that mid to late game strategy. Flashing in that Vendilion click in his opponent's turn, untapping, getting in for 3, so he's now got a clock. Following it up with a Planeswalker that attacks Matt's hand. A deck like Channel Mirror needs to have a maximum velocity of cards in order to go off. It's not a deck where you can, when you have no cards in hand and you've got you just top deck the card you need to win. You usually need 2 or 3 cards to kind of go off properly. And so James has really settled into his control position here. The Liliana of the Veil going up at his opponent's hand.
Looks like it's going to be pretty hard for Matt to come back here. He does have a land in hand that I think he's just okay with discarding to Liliana, but he also has the Burning Wish. He did have a little peek at his sideboard, possibly giving it away to James, that he does have some sort of wish in his hand. But there's just not a whole lot that he can get. James is sort of firing on all cylinders right now, taking him from all different angles, so it's going to be very hard for Matt to figure out exactly what he needs to accumulate to get this back.
Yeah, James last turn when Liliana came down, plussed up and got rid of a Lingering Souls, which is really bad news for Matt because that's just pure value for James.
Yeah.
That's a card that he's more than happy to discard, and we'll see him flashback that now, get cash that in for 2 more Spirit tokens.
2 more attackers,
put on that pressure.
Oh yeah, and he's at 13 life now. I mean, that's only 3 more hits total to get that all the way down to get Matt all the way down to 0, and that's just kind of what he needs. But he does have a couple of mana up, possibly for a counterspell in hand, but I think he's feeling pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, and we see here Matt end of turn cashing in that credit voucher.
Yep.
Putting 1 card back. He'll draw a card from that. Hopefully it'll be Channel. Hopefully the card for turn he'll draw is Emrakul, and
that's all it'll need to be.
all she wrote, Fortunately, it doesn't look like he's gotten that. He
hasn't windmill slam it down hard enough. Looks to be just a mana dork of some sort, but not a great place to be in. I mean, where Liliana might actually get to ultimate this game, because Matt's just not has no intention of pressuring James in any way. He's gonna win him in 1 turn, but not being able to pressure this Liliana might actually be the death of him.
Yep. So Liliana's going to go down here, getting rid of Matt's mana dork there, really ensuring that there's just cutting off as many outs for Matt as possible.
Yeah, sure, it's definitely reasonable. I'm definitely a much more grittier person than James. James seems to be knowing exactly what he's doing, but God, I would have just snapped off trying to double Stone Rain my opponent the best I can with Liliana.
Yeah, I think James realises really no use going up. Matt's got no cards in hand. Looks like James's hand is pretty loaded himself. He's got Gideon there, and he's got a Spell Snare to answer Channel, or many other 2-drop cards I'm sure that Matt's running in his deck.
Looks like he's running a Flusterstorm in that main, possibly coming out of the sideboard, but Flusterstorm being a very good card in Highlander in general, but even possibly mainboard.
Yeah,
very good card. Oh, we see there's the Channel right at the very bottom of his deck, so he's probably pretty happy to shuffle it, hopefully back to the top.
Yeah. So this is Matt fabricating here, searching his library for an artifact. You can see he's put the Lich's Mirror at the bottom of his deck, right in the view of the camera. So
giving us a good, decent look.
There he is, and look, it may be that he's going to play that Channel Mirror, which means that if he would go to 0 life, instead he shuffles his board state and graveyard in, and goes back to 20 life. So it's giving him several extra turns, but obviously at the cost There we go.
Yeah.
We see James slam the Gideon there. Immediately ultimate to give his creatures +1/+1, which will seal the deal.
And that's all she wrote. Poor Matt, even that the Lich's Mirror being 5 mana, so trying to bait James into ticking up his Lily once again to put the Lich's Mirror in his graveyard. But unfortunately, Matt just couldn't sort of piece it together. But fortunately for James, he takes it out for the, I think he's 3-0, 3-0, 4-0 at this point. I think he was pretty happy with his score at the end of the day. The way that it was set up, we had 5 rounds with a cut to top 8, of which we'll go into very soon. Unfortunately, we missed out on round 5, but we'll go straight into the top 8 after this. So please feel free to tune in, stick around, and enjoy the rest of the matches.